Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special event organised today by the British Union of Spiritist Societies. Today, our good friend Flavio Zanetti will be talking about Léon Denis, the Celtic Genius and the Invisible World. Now, this event today is being streamed on both YouTube and Facebook by the Irish Spiritist Federation, Kardec Radio, Kardec Group, and the British Union of Spiritist Societies, BUS. Please make sure that you give a thumbs up and give a like for this event wherever you're watching, and make sure that you follow and subscribe to these channels as well. And stick around until the end, as we'll have a short Q&A with Flavio, and then will be one or two announcements from the British Union of Spiritist Societies. So let's bring on Flavio. So, hey Flavio, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Adam. How are you?
I'm really good. Your volume's gone really loud again, unfortunately.
Oh, let me adjust that.
So many people complain that my volume's too quiet, and so we don't want people having big dynamic problems.
No. Is it better now, Adam? Is it better now?
Yes, should be fine.
Okay. Fantastic.
So let's give a short introduction as to who Flavio is for those who don't know him yet. So Flavio Zanetti has always been amazed by the degree of rational comprehension and comforting Spiritism brings comfort that Spiritism brings to humanity. He is an avid Spiritist student and a tireless worker for the Spiritist movement in the United States and abroad. Since 1999, he has worked in different positions for the Allan Kardec Spiritist Society of Massachusetts. Between 2008 and 2012, he acted as the programs director for the United States Spiritist Council, helping organizations across the United States, both as lecturer, workshop, and event coordinator. Personally, he is a global services leader for a multinational telecommunications company for over 20 years. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Engineering, a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology, and a Master's in International Management and Business. He lives in Boston with his wife and their beautiful 8-year-old twin daughters. So if you have any questions for Flavio about his talk, or just want to say hello, please type away in the chat or comment area of wherever you're watching, on the Facebook or YouTube channel, wherever you are. And I can see that some people are already saying hello to us right now. And of course, let us know where you're watching from. It's really great if we know where in the world you are. So we can already see hello from Fabrizio over down in Bournemouth here in the UK. Thanks for being with us. Now, as we said, Flavio is going to be talking about Léon Denis, the Celtic genius in the invisible world. And we were just talking just now, how do you pronounce the word, Celtic or Celtic?
That's a great question, Adam. You guys should know this better than I do.
Yeah.
Being within the region, I pronounce it Celtic.
Yeah, well, I think it depends, but also I don't think it really matters fully. But exactly. Anyway, over to you, Flavio, for your fantastic talk.
Okay, thank you, Adam, and welcome everybody that's joining us from wherever you are, all over the world. We hope you have a fantastic time with us here. Keep in mind that we're going to have some time for Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, any comments, I would love to hear them from you. Please feel free to submit them through whichever platform you're following us from today. So as Adam mentioned, we're going to be talking about the book called The Celtic Genius and the Invisible Book. Let me just, before we get there, let me just ask, or thank all of our benevolent spirits who are here with us, all of our guardian angels, all of our spirit guides that are following us from wherever we are. We thank them for their help. We thank them for their assistance. And we also ask them to stay with us, bringing our hearts at peace and really, shining light into our minds so we can really comprehend the text or the topic here with the same rigor and discipline through which we put together in preparing that for you guys. So Léon Denis writes this book at the very last minute of his physical life. This book was written in published, I should say, in 1927, and the book was published only 2 days before Léon Denis passed away, be discarnated. So the interesting thing about this book is not only was Léon Denis' last work, but he also brings some interesting findings about the Celtic people, and also some interconnections, or how things are intertwined between the Celtic, discipline, or the Celtic philosophy and religion, as well as Spiritism. That's what we're going to see here today. So for those folks that are, following us from the United States, that's not a talk about the Boston Celtics. We pronounce them here Celtics, even though it's the same name, but this is not a conversation about basketball. Rather, it is a discussion about the Celts, or the people. So first question I have is, who are the Celts? So if I were to, if somebody runs, by you, maybe in the underground or in the street, and hey, do you know what the Celts were? People automatically assign them or associate them with Irish people. Is that true? Let's look at the overall Celtic Empire back in the days. So the Celtic Empire, as you can see here from this picture, was really spread out from a lot of places in Europe. Léon Denis makes an argument that given the Celtic people's energy and their warlike temperament, the Celts were able to really spread out very quickly throughout Europe. Léon Denis also mentions that they were free-spiritedness, and because of that, they were no match for the Roman Empire. So if you look at this map, I hope you can see it on the small screen here. If you look at this map, thank you, Adam, which shows Gaul and the vicinity, this is the 1st century before Christ, and really spread out throughout most of Western Europe. The Celts were driven back to eventually to the westernmost part of Europe on the Irish Sea. That's why one of the main reasons people today automatically associate the Celtic people with Irish people. So when we look at that, let me just switch over the slide here real quick. When we look at that, these are the definitions that we see, not only in the Léon Denis's book, but also from history books that we were able to corroborate as well. So here, for example, the definition is the Celtic were a nomadic tribe of warriors whose appearance in Europe dates back to 800 before Christ. So they've been around for many, many centuries. This is what we can learn from history here. Although, as we mentioned, they're mostly associated with Ireland. They're very most powerful. The Celts controlled vast areas. They're ranging from Turkey all the way up to on the border of Asia, all the way to Ireland. So again, in the map we saw, they were around from a lot of places. They were found in a lot of different places. If I ask the question, so why Ireland? Why did they just ended up staying there, most often, right? So as the author suggests, because of its western location, Ireland, unlike Britain, where they were driven back by various invaders, was relatively isolated and stay, free from the Roman colonization. That's one of the reasons why the Celtic Irish culture stayed mostly the same until the arrival of Christianity. So in those 800 years that we've talked, where the Celts made their move from Turkey all the way up to Ireland, their culture stayed pretty much the same because it was not invaded predominantly as it was from the Ottoman Empire and the other dynasties that we've seen in those centuries before Christ. So we see that from the Léon Denis's work as well as from historians all over the world. So in a nutshell, or basically what we're trying to suggest here, folks, is that Ireland was not the only place where the Celts or the Celtic people flourished. We have other areas that they managed to hold on and really kept the overall Celtic heritage. So, for example, Ireland, obviously, Scotland, Wales, the Isle of Man, Brittany, France, Cornwall, and England as well. So those places, we still see a lot of vestiges of the Celtic culture. Okay, Flavio, but is this a spiritist talk or is a geography discussion? You may be wondering, are we here to talk about spiritism or are we here to talk about geography? I think it's important for us to understand a little bit of geography, a little bit of history first, so we can make the connections. That's exactly what Léon Denis does in his book. He starts by really talking about the people, the culture, the costumes, right? What they used to do, and what are the things that was happening with the Celtic people and whatnot. And then eventually, he really starts making some comparison between the people, the culture, and spiritism, which are going to be starting to really delve right into it. So, as we see in this picture, we have the description of a Celtic warrior in white, clothing. Alan Kardec from the BBC documentary that we found, very appropriate for what the audience we're talking to here, and of course Jesus at the bottom. So there's a very interesting parallel between the Celtic religion and philosophy with spiritism, and this is what we're going to be seeing next. So buckle up, fasten your seatbelts. That's what we're going to move towards next. So let me just say that before we delve into that, I think it's important to bring this topic here, that our God is everywhere. You may have heard this before. You may have seen this written on the Genesis, if you read the Genesis, or other books from Allan Kardec, where he argues that God is found everywhere. God sees everything and presides over everything, even the most insignificant things. And we decided to include this quote here just to say that nothing happens in the world without God's understanding. You may have heard the old phrase that says, "Not even a leaf from a tree falls down without God's knowledge." So what are we trying to suggest here? That a movement as large as the Celtic movement, a people or a culture as vast as it was the Celtic culture, this, of course, happened under God's eyes, right? So we're suggesting that there was a purpose for that. But what was the purpose? What were they trying to do? What were the things that they developed that we could still use today? What were the things that they've preached, that they've talked about? What were the areas that they touched that were not touched before or haven't really been presented beforehand? And what are some of the areas, some of the knowledge or some of the teachings that have really, really festered or really broadcasted over other parts of the world that today we're still living based on them? That's what we're going to be seeing next. So if I look at the Druids, and this is a new term, I understand that, but the Druids were really considered the sacred people from the Celts. And the interesting thing here is that almost everything we know about the Druids is secondhand knowledge. Some surviving texts that mention or were written by non-Druids, meaning folks that observed Druids and they wrote about them, or something that folks that really were not part of the people, but they were not Druids themselves. So if you think about this from a scientific mind, that presents or poses a small problem for modern day historians, because if they're trying to understand who they were, their costumes, their habits and whatnot, how those things changed over time, without having a way to compare, it's very difficult. For example, Julius Caesar from Rome, who conquered Gaul, that the region that I showed you before, is among one of the main sources of information about the Druids, because he left a lot of texts, a lot of written documents that really talked about Druids and how they really left some of their teachings. It's also important to mention that the Druids preferred oral or spoken teaching as opposed to written teaching. So a lot of what they taught, it was taught verbally or orally, right? Through a community of people discussing things and really passing those things to other folks as opposed to really leaving texts or leaving written evidence, right, for posterity or for the world. So look how interesting quote from Barry Cunliffe from his book called Druids, a very short introduction. This was published by the Oxford University Press from 2010. And I quote here his comment. People in ancient Britain and France who served a variety of roles. These were the Druids. What kind of roles did they serve? They were philosophers, teachers, judges. They really maintain or control communal wisdoms, right? They were the old sages from the Celtic people, and they knew about things around the natural world, the traditions of the people, and they were, this is really important, the mediators between humans and gods. If you're not new, or if you're not a first time you've heard the word spiritism, when you look at this definition, mediators between humans and gods, you automatically associate that with mediumship, right? That's my understanding. So they were really mediums. But why not use the word medium? Because guess what? The word medium was not invented when the Druids were here. The word medium was invented by Allan Kardec in the 19th century with the publication of the Medium's book. That's one of the main reasons why the word medium is not here. But they were the communicators, the mediators between humans and gods, lowercase g, as we understand, spirits, same type of communication, same type of mediation that we see today in our spiritist centers, where people talk to, spiritual entities in a way that we communicate with them, we listen to them, we hear feedback, we learn from them. They present us teachings, evidence, stories, all those things. So when I read this quote, read this book in preparation for this talk, I found it very interesting that with Barry Cunliffe, I believe that's how you pronounce his last name, when Barry Cunliffe, produces this work, folks, this is only 10 years ago. So he wrote this book after a very lengthy study, but only 10 years ago. And to really understand, there's a movement now that folks are trying to understand a lot more what the Druids have left to us. And this is exactly what we're doing here with Léon Denis. Hopefully they'll be able to really lay their hands on Léon Denis's book, which brings a lot of interesting knowledge about Druidism, as we're going to see next. So I'll take a pause here. If you have any questions, once again, please feel free to submit them into our own platforms that you're following us from. I believe this is being broadcasted over Facebook as well as YouTube. So Léon Denis suggests that the Druid synthesis stands as one of the greatest apogees which the philosophical thought could ever achieve. That's a huge statement. Let's think about this for a second. Léon Denis is suggesting that the synthesis of the Druidism, or the religion philosophy that the Druids really taught their people, or really is one of the greatest apogees, one of the greatest coming which any philosophical thought could ever achieve. That's a huge statement. But look what Aristotle, of course, many years before Léon Denis, wrote, that philosophy was born with the Celts, and that before being known to the Greeks, so before the Greeks knew about philosophy, it had been cultivated by the Gauls, by those they call Druids, and Semnotes. So Semnotes, as Aristotle defines, are folks that admire God and its power. Folks that really admire, God, nature, and the power within that. Those are the Semnotes, as we learn from Aristotle. So when I read that, I confess that I was a little taken aback, because I myself did not, know about that. I read this book, 20 plus years ago, and there were some things that, just passed by me. I did not really pay attention with the same emphasis as I did for, preparing for this talk. I guess the old saying that goes, you only learn when you teach. goes a long way here, because when I read this book 20 plus years ago, I was just reading it. Now I reread it in order to prepare for this, for this work here. And this quote, amongst some others that I'll share down the road with you guys, really has opened my eyes for a lot of things. So let's delve into some of the principles from the Druids. So first of all, they had a huge respect for nature. Huge respect for nature. And when I read that, I connected with where we are right now. How much respect do we have for nature today? Are we really taking care of our home? Are we really keeping our home clean, our home healthy? When I say that, I think it's important to understand that the world that we live in, which is, right, Earth, it's our home. And you have to take care of it. You have to maintain it. You have to clean it. We have to, do whatever it takes to really ensure that's healthy, that's prosperous, that's fertile. And the Druids already had those teachings, already had that knowledge, almost 3,000 years ago. So a lot of that, unfortunately, has been lost through time. And you see, if you look at the amount of plastic we have in our oceans today, if you look at, the ozone layer being destroyed and global warming, I'm not talking politics, but I'm talking about what science is telling us to pay attention with what we're doing with our homes. Guess what? The Druids already knew that 3,000 almost years ago. And that knowledge sort of got lost through time, or through all time, right? They also had the second basic principle, which is the immortality of the soul. They did believe in reincarnation. They knew about reincarnation, and they had some processes. They had some ways that, we'll share in a minute, ways that the soul progresses through really coming back and incarnating in different places of the universe. They already had that. Interesting thing that I like to bring to your attention, they look at the oak trees as sacred. And really, it symbolized the immortality of the soul, because this was new to me as well. Again, when I read the book for the first time, I totally missed this, because when you have an oak tree that's dead, and within that dead trunk, oftentimes you can still see germinate seeds of a new tree. So if you slice that tree, in the middle, within that middle trunk, oftentimes you still see afterwards, other seeds of a new tree germinate. And a new tree probably could potentially be brought up from that dead trunk in the middle. So that was the symbolism that they used to explain or to explicate to their people how our soul survives death. In the same way that the oak tree survives its death, it's just another phase that we all have to go through. Nothing miraculous, nothing, mystic, just the way it is. Just the same way as we all are going to go through, our physical death, but our immortal, lives, our spirits, ours and spirits will never die. That's the same exact teaching that we saw from the Druids 3,000 years ago. So the life after death and the communication with the dead are its main tenets. That's exactly what they used to teach their own people. So, spoiler alert, as my daughters would like to say, Daddy in his spoiler alerts. Some interesting facts ahead. So let's look at Pythagoras, the Greek philosopher, mathematician, and all that. Was he a Druid? There are some people that argue that he was, others argue that he was not. But look at what we find in the Léon Denis's book. Léon Denis brings a couple of historians and researchers, for example, Jean Renard, that said that they belonged, Pythagoras and the Druids, to the same school of thought. They both were part of the same school of thought. Let's keep in mind that Pythagoras never really called himself a Druid, but if you look at the way what he preached in his life, what he studied, what he developed, and we're going to get there in a minute from what's in yellow down in the slide. He had a medium, right? Theoclia, whom, again, later in life, he ended up marrying her. and he really had a lot of communications with spirits. A lot of what he himself argues or suggests that a lot of what he's developed did not only come from him, but also from the spirits. Jamblique, a French historian, suggested that Pythagoras was instructed by the Celts. Again, that's what this author suggests. This other one here, Polyhistor, says that Pythagoras traveled with the Druids and Brahmin, and they're just a class in Hinduism. You can see them as specialized priests. They're teachers, like gurus. And also they protect all the sacred learning, like the Bhagavad Gita and all the new teachings across generations. So if you look at the way Hinduism works, these folks are tasked to protect the knowledge and the teachings that were written 6,000 years ago by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, the book, right, the sacred book, so that it still is relevant with the what we see today. Those are the folks that Pythagoras used to hang out with. Right? And also Pope Clement I suggested that Pythagoras and Druids are very similar doctrines. So when we look at this, there's a lot of similarities between what Pythagoras wrote and the Druids. So I just thought it was interesting to bring this topic, because there's a lot more folks that have had connections with the Druids than we are aware of. That's what I got out of this conversation. Moving forward, one of the teachings that also I believe it's important to mention is that it's a simple fact that the Druids had a huge connection with the invisible world, and to the point that they even mentioned that the visible and invisible worlds always correspond to each other. And it is in some of the nature's sanctuaries that this communion became easier, or this communion became more intense and more profound. So what is Léon Denis trying to say here, folks, is that it's a lot easier to connect with God through nature. You may even have heard me in the beginning of this, in the conversation, saying that let's raise our thoughts to our teacher, to Jesus, right? Sometimes they asked to really lower down their thoughts, or lower down their, try to connect with the greater world, with the greater, good, with, the divine. A lot of folks try to really imagine nature, a quiet in a lake or a landscape. It's a lot easier to do that. That's exactly what Léon Denis is telling us, because when we're asked to think about God, we can't really, there's no way to touch what we know about God, but we can actually connect with God through its works, which is nature. So as you see in this picture here, this is a lake that, because of the difference in temperature, the water starts foaming because of the water is very warm and the air temperature is very cold. So because of that, condensation, you see a lot of these vapors going up to the point that even invades that house that's been built on the lake shore. So again, some nature components that really makes us at least think that this is a way, it's the simplest or an easier way to connect with our Creator through nature. Interesting enough that this is not only Léon Denis who talks about this. If you look at the author Friedrich Schelling, he argues that nature is visible spirit here in the creation, capital K spirit, and spirit is invisible nature. So everything that's around us, God's there, right? Everything that's around us, God is there. And of course, what's around us, that is nature, it's also part of God. That's exactly what he's suggesting on this quote. Okay, Flavio, I get it, but what about the convergence points between Spiritism and Druidism? Because we've learned a lot of the Druids, how they believed in life after life, how they believed in the immortality of the soul, their very important philosophy and all these things. But what are the connections? What are the main connections? The first one that I'll highlight is when Léon Denis talks about the pathway from one life to the other. So what is the pathway from one life to the other that we know today? And this is, if we were in a physical face-to-face setting, I would ask that question live, and people usually answer, oh, it's death. Or it's when I die, I'm going to wake up to the new life. Or it's when I go through a traumatic event, when I go through something like a very hard, illness or something that makes me open up my conscience to a new life. So what I'm suggesting here is the new life as a spiritual life, not a new life, our different way of interpreting our own life. But that's one area that we see the Druids and their teachings really converge with Spiritism. Let's take a look at that in a little more details. So the Druids really suggested that there are 3 cycles of life. That's part of their main tenets. And they even have names for these cycles of life. For example, the Kugant, that's how I pronounce it. I'm not sure if it's right or wrong. If anybody knows, please help us out. Right, Kugant, who is the cycle of needs. And humans, in their most rudimentary forms, or Paleolithic times, or places where it's very rudimentary, it's very, very, very basic forms of living. Then they move to the development phase or development cycle, which is a bread, and in this place, that's the combination of multiple lives. The lives that we're in right now, that's part of a bread, where us spirits are acquiring this idea of a conscience, or the idea that we are the drivers of our own lives, or through free will we're able to make our lives better. We're able to really do something good for ourselves, for others, and all those things. So a bread is that let's say a place or a phase or a cycle, I should say, right? To use their own terms, a cycle where we do a lot of the learning, and also a lot of the trial and error, a lot of the experiences, right? We learn from making a mistake. We learn from, making it right. That's a bread in their own terms. And they have their final cycle, which is Gwynfyd, not sure if that's how you pronounce it, which is really plenitude, where spirits, ourselves, we are free from, excuse me, we're not free from a cold, but we're free from material limitations and death, meaning we don't have to incarnate any longer. And the movement towards a higher perfection is really achieved once we reach Gwynfyd, or this cycle of happiness, or nirvana, as the Buddhists used to say. But Flavio, what is the connection with Spiritism? It's more aligned than we thought. So, for example, as we learned from Allan Kardec in the Spirits book, we have places, or sometimes even locations. It goes a little more details, but I took it down the 3 main categories of spirits: the impure spirits, or really aligned to Kugant; good spirits. We see a lot of good spirits today on Earth. We see a lot of good spirits in the world of trial and expiations, but we still see some spirits that are not, good yet. They're still learning. So it's a lot of trial and error. And we have this place of pure spirits, for example, where Christ came from, this location of pure spirits or angelic spirits, that if we really could make a definition or make a comparison, we'll have that with Gwynfyd, right? So it's a very similar spiritist view if you look at the progression of spirits. I say very similar because it's not, apples for apples in terms of, yes, we have 2 apples on the picture. One is a Macintosh apple, one is a green apple. Even though they're 2 apples, even though they serve to really, end our hunger, we can really eat an apple and be, satisfied. But their tastes is the same, is different, right? So their taste is slightly different. So I have here a comment from Liz Carter. Gwynfyd is read Gwynfyd, Gwynfyd or something. So thank you. I appreciate the help. So when I look at that, it's a very similar comparison with what Spiritism later on ended up teaching us. But folks, it's very similar. Even though there's some different definitions and whatnot, different names, doesn't matter. The essence of the teaching is the same. That we all need to progress in our own lives. We all need to do good for others. We all need to learn. Earth is a school, it's a hospital, it's a jail for all of us. And we might be in different parts of that, sometimes even hospital, a jail, and a school in the same incarnation. But at the end of the day, this shows a trajectory towards the future. That's exactly what we're trying to suggest here. So let's move forward. Let's look at the concept of God. Let's first look at the Spiritist view of God. As we learn from Spiritism, God is not a person. The whole idea that God is an old man with the white beard, with the cane, that's like an old interpretation that we don't really subscribe to. We Spiritists understand that God is the supreme intelligence of the universe. It's the first cause of all things. That's on question number 1 from the Spirit's book. And down the road in the Spirit's book, down some of the questions, he talks about, or the Spirit of Truth talks about the God being eternal, immutable, immaterial, unique, all-powerful.
Okay, well, sorry about that. We do know that Flavio is having a few technical issues today with his microphone, so he'll be back in just a moment. But in the meantime, please remember to send us a hello. Let us know where you're watching from. Send any questions for the Q&A. Make sure you give the thumbs up and a like for this event, no matter where you're watching, whether it's on the bus, the Irish Spiritist Federation, Kardec Group, or Kardec Radio, YouTube, or Facebook channels. Now we're just waiting for Flavio to come back, and he's almost back. Here we go. You're back.
I know what happened. I think I was speaking too loud, Adam. I apologize.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
I got a little passionate about the topic. Again, sorry about that. Don't know what happened. Let me share again where we were. I'm using a different browser now, just in case. Let's see if you see that there, Adam.
Yep, there we go.
Fantastic. All right, let's keep going. I apologize, folks. Coming back. So God and its own definition, or as we look at not only the definition of God, but all of the way that we can understand God's, in its own shape, form, and power. Let's look at the comparison with the Celtic view of God. And this is one of the quotes I got from the historian that I mentioned before. The Celtic view of God is that they believe in the existence of one just being, all-powerful, infinitely wise, and good. That's their definition. And the source and maintainer of all objects. That's exactly what the author talks about this, Barry Cunliffe. Meaning, when you look at this definition, it's pretty much the same. I mean, it's very close. They're closely aligned. But why haven't we learned from the Celtic people before? That's a great question, because they've taught, humankind all these things from 800 years before Christ, and humanity still has not learned. That's the suggestion, the point I'm trying to make here. So if we connect that with the Judeo-Christian tradition, that a lot of authors, a lot of studious folks suggest, they were the very first monotheistic, or one, God, theos, God-istic, really ideology or study, and mono of only one. Some authors suggest that they were the first tradition, but instead, into looking in just the Judeo tradition or Christian view of God, Léon Denis calls our attention that the Druids were in fact the first ones. Or in short, the doctrine of the Druids, or their philosophy, their religion, whatever you want to call it, rests on these 3 fundamental principles. We talked about the immortality of the soul, the eternity of the universe, and the eternity of God. It's right there. It's in their own quote-unquote, teachings, so to speak. So when we do that, look at how interesting quote Léon Denis left for us to analyze. While the Bible presents us with the anthropomorphic, anthropos, right, human beings, morphic, in a way, or form, in the form of a man or form of human, view of God, that is similar to a man due to certain imperfections, the God of Druids soars high above human miseries. So it's not a God that gets sick, for example. It's not a God that has, gets mad or gets angry. No. Gets jealous or it's going to punish us. No. God does not punish us. That's exactly what the Druids had taught us in the past. Or like nature doesn't punish us. Nature, has consequences as we learn from Spiritism, the law of action and reaction. Whatever we do, there's a consequence. Same thing with nature. If we do something to nature, nature's going to have a consequence. That's exactly, if we do an analogy with our own lives, how we conduct our lives, how we behave towards others, how we put into practice the teachings, the learnings, and there be Spiritist learnings, Christian learnings, from Judaism, from Druid. It doesn't really matter where we're getting our learnings from. What matters is how much we're putting them into practice. This is exactly what Léon Denis is suggesting for us to take a look at here. Okay, Flavio, what about reincarnation? Do they believe in reincarnation like we do in Spiritism? 100%. The Druids taught the concept of reincarnation in every aspect of their religion. So, for example, I'm sure you've seen, if you follow Spiritism, you may have seen this quote before from Allan Kardec himself: to be born, to die, to be reborn yet again, and to always progress. That is the natural law, suggesting that we'll come back, we'll continue learning, we'll progress, and we'll, eventually or at one time reach the same level as spirits like Jesus did, for example. So that's what we learn from Spiritism. Also, it's important to mention here that Spiritism teaches us that none of us are special. I'm sorry to break it to you folks, but you are not special. Your mom may have told you you're special. Your dad may have told you you're special, but you are not. All of us are children of God, and God loves all of us the exact same way. And the way I say this is because if God had special, love for some kids or some peoples or some folks based on where they were born or based on what language they speak or based on how much if God had preferential treatment for some, he would not be a fair and just God. So the God that we learn from Spiritism is the very same God that the Druids used to preach, which is a God for all, which is a God that loves everyone, like nature. Nature doesn't have any prejudices. Nature doesn't treat people one way versus other people. No, it's the same. If you go and swim into a river, or if you go into a waterfall, or whatever you do with nature, it's the same treatment with anybody that goes there. How interesting that concept. So the Celtic philosophy has three conditions for plenitude, the way they call, as Gwenvet, as Liz mentioned to us. So it's one, folks have to transmigrate in a breed. Then they have to transmigrate in Gwenvet. And then they have to remember all these things, all these learnings since the very beginning for them to be, to achieve plenitude. Folks, that's exactly what we learn from Spiritism. There's no difference. We're going to go back into this life. We're going to learn more. We're going to have different experiences. We're going to have this. It's exactly the same teaching. It's a journey. That's what we learn. That's exactly, the things that we learn here. So with that being said, I think it's important to bring this quote, and I use Stonehenge as my picture here behind, right? It's a quote from Léon Denis, when he was studying the Celtic religion or philosophy, and that everything that depends on the world perishes. Institutions, monuments, empires, even the Celtic Empire perished, as we learned from today. But in the midst of all these precarious objects, There's a being that is only temporarily living here in this world, but he rises to the sky with a sublimity that the earth, despite its splendor, never reaches. And that's a human being. That's us. That's God's creature. So God's creature is way above, of course, what we learn, what we learn from nature. But even though, which is a great food for thought here for us, even though nature is the exemplification of God, we are the children of God. That's one of the teachings that we learn. And to really solidify that message, look at the what we learned from Léon Denis as well. In order to make life wholesome and fertile, folks must understand its deep meaning. This is not our only life. We're gonna have other lives. We're gonna come back into this world, in this planet, other planets, and whatnot. And also, we have to comprehend its end. What's the end of our lives? Not only this life, but our trajectory towards, through all time, as we learn from the Druids, as we learn from Spiritism and other philosophies out there. It's the idea around that life dominates people's existences. Life really inspires our actions, guides us to either lower or higher goals. So Léon Denis mentions that one of the key motivators for the Druids were life itself, life as the driver. The more they lived, the more they learned from it, the better actions they took around life, which I think it's amazing. If you stop to think about this, that's why oftentimes, not always, oftentimes, not generalizing here, but oftentimes people that have later in ages, they become wiser. They don't worry about small things as if we're adolescents, we do sometimes. They don't worry about small things that sometimes as we young adults, not me, but some young adults, I've been past that already, worry, so much. So I can definitely see that here. It's a great way that really showcases and reminds me from a phrase from the Spirit Guided Manual that goes somewhere along the lines of each day that dawns, or each day that starts, is a blank page for all of us to record our thoughts, our actions, and behaviors. It's a blank page for our books. In essence, Emmanuel says, each day is a preparation for our own tomorrow. So as we read a book, every page that comes before the next page is a preparation for the next page, and the next page, and the next page. And then the story full develops, and the story full is fully thought, right? But if we're coming to a close here, but I'd like to mention that, what we learned from Jesus when he came, here 2,000 years ago, that's a quote that's in John chapter 14, verses 7, actually it's 15 to 17, there's a typo there. If you love me, keep my commands, and I will ask the Father, the living God, and he will give you another consoler to help you and be with you forever, or the Spirit of truth. And we Spiritists believe that's what we learn from Spiritism, because at the end of the day, the message has been given to us through the Druids, through before, other disciples, other sages, but we were so busy that we didn't pay attention. We were so looking elsewhere that we didn't stop to pay attention. And if we look really deeply into Spiritism, which has a lot of similarities, as we've mentioned here, with Druidism, it's really aimed to contribute so that humankind can achieve its moral and intellectual progress. So when I look at what Léon Denis is arguing in this book, the Celtic Genius, it's all its teachings. It's everything we learn from the Celtic, from Druidism and all that. But if we're able to align what we're doing, if we're able to really get those teachings, compare them with Spiritism, understand the philosophy, understand the similarities, we're going to have a lot better tools that can really help us achieve our moral and intellectual progress. We're going to have better tools to make our lives better lives, not only for ourselves, but also for our loved ones that live around us. And in the same way as we learned from the Celts, right? Maybe this is their breed that we're living right now. And this is, again, it's preparing us for the next phase, the Gwynvid, or it's preparing us to become more charitable spirits, to become more loving, more caring, more indulgent towards others' mistakes, to forgive more, to really follow Jesus' teachings, which is, again, the continuation of all the teachings that we've seen before. So with that, I think it's important to thank our dear author, right, Léon Denis, for his works. It's also important to say that he finished his book. He was already blind. He had a couple of folks that were helping him on his bedside read the last parts of the book, so he could still edit them and make sure that the concept that was written there was the concept that he was trying to write. So thank you, our dear Léon Denis, wherever you are right now, for your contributions. And this is what we planned to share with you guys today. Thank you for your time. And Adam, I believe we have some time for Q&A, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely. Let's see if there's anyone who has any questions to come along about that. But no, thank you so much for that talk, Flavio. That's wonderful. It's certainly a book that I myself haven't heard or read of yet. I'm still learning about Léon Denis myself. And for him to make these comparisons, to look at the Celtic life, to see how it relates to Spiritism, these parallels that are there, is absolutely wonderful. And I'd just like to share my screen quickly, because what I have found is... Oh, if I actually bring it in. There we go. So here we go. This is a scanned front copy of that 1927 book by Léon Denis.
Wow.
And that's
you got some antique version
exactly
here.
Exactly. This is just wonderful. It's always wonderful when we have this opportunity to look online and to actually look at the real cover, the original cover of these books that these wonderful people dedicated so much time to write for various reasons. So let's go and take a look. Well, while we're waiting for any questions, let's say hello to all our friends who have said hello from Florida, from San Antonio, from Bournemouth, from London, from Cardiff, from Winchester, from Slough, and from Oxfordshire. Hello, everyone who's been watching with us. Let's just bring up a comment here from Liz, because Liz is our representative over in Wales. So thank you for being with us, Liz. No, we have a Celtic representative.
There you go. Welcome, Liz. So good. Yeah. Happy that you see here.
Yeah. And a nice thank you from Michael as well. And from someone called Valeria. I have no idea who this is. Of course I do. And okay. So we don't really have any questions come in, Flavio. So obviously you gave so much great information. But what were the things that surprised you the most while you were reading this?
Yeah, so great question, Adam. So a couple of things that surprised me the most were the similarities with what we learned from Spiritism. So the evolution, how Léon Denis talked about the Druids having that idea of a journey, right? As opposed to, as we learn from Spiritism, the Spiritist scale, or the Spirit scale, as we learn, a lot of similarities. The concept of God, not a person. Oftentimes, even though the Celtic, ideology or philosophy or society were still paternalistic, so to speak, but they saw God as a female, as a caring mother, right? As opposed to an old man, as I mentioned before. That's funny because when I pray, in my head, I dear mother and father God. I call God mother and father because it's the same. It's together, right? It's the both of them together, for me at least. So they have that same philosophy. I had no idea. So I got that too. The development of the way they call it, the development of spirits or the development of the soul. the immortality, the way they communicated with other spirits, mediumship. Mediumship was key. Now let's keep in mind that I left this for the end. Allan Kardec, the codifier of Spiritism. The name Allan Kardec was not the French name that he had, a birth name, but rather a Celtic name from one of his previous incarnations that ended up using as a pseudonym for his works. So Allan Kardec is a Celtic name that he used before. So there are a lot of connections. By all means, this is not the end of it. I'm sure there are other historians and researchers that might describe, that might find other connections or other really synergies between Spiritism and the Celtic philosophy. But it's something that I myself would love to learn more as well, because again, Léon Denis is only one book. I'm sure there are others out there that will be able to really read and really make some connections with Spiritism.
Yeah. We have another quick comment here from Liz. It's sad that Druid teachings have been cast aside in history. The information Flavio showed us that the truth is there and that Spiritism just came to reinforce it to us.
100%, Liz. I do believe that too. In the book called On the Way to the Light by the Spirit Guide Emmanuel, it shows or tells us that even though Jesus was part, since the beginning of Earth has been, formed, all these missionaries, all these folks that were sent to Earth, they were sent in different times to start really broadcasting the truth. But because of our own, human selfishness and pride, we sort of changed the truth or changed the teachings to our own advantages. That happened with Christianity once they abolished the reincarnation concept, right? 300, after AC. Happened with the Druids. Because of the interpretation of Christianity, they just, pushed it aside. So it happens, and my hope or my understanding is that since Spiritism is a very scientific, in the nature, or I call them a progressive body of knowledge that's in constant development, that really goes back and really opens our minds to really understand these teachings. They're not better or worse; they're just different, and they were there from a different point in time. But if we go to the roots of it, they're much more similar than we ever thought. That's what I got out of the book as well. Again, I read this when I was a teenager, some 20, almost 30 years ago. I read it again a couple of weeks ago, and I learned way more now than I did before. I guess I'm progressing in the whole concept of the Druidism here, right? We're getting more or less imperfect as we progress in age.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much that we perhaps take for granted about the history of mankind and how our ancestors really thought, how religions really acted or reacted, because we know that many religious books for many religions have been changed over the hundreds, thousands of years. Mm-hmm. And like you said, the Council of Nicaea took out from early Christianity the idea, the concept of reincarnation.
Yep.
So we know that the Egyptians had a form of reincarnation. We know that Judaism has a form of reincarnation. We know that Hindu faith has a form of reincarnation. So there's Buddhism. But to know this from the Druids as well, who have been seen as these paganistic people who haven't really been for our complete consideration, it helps us to see that we are all on the same path.
Oh yeah, I fully agree to that as well, Adam. I know this is not a talk on reincarnation, but if folks are curious about reincarnation and Christianity, there's a book that I highly recommend. It's from Elizabeth Clare Prophet, the author, and the name, if I'm not mistaken, is Reincarnation: The Missing Link in Christianity. So she really draws a lot of parallels. She explains what happened in the Council of Nicaea, 343, AC. There's a lot of history behind that book. And by the way, it's not a Spiritist book. It's from a historian, a Christianity historian, that fully believes reincarnation was taken away based on some, interest from some folks back in the days. Mm-hmm. So if you're curious about that, I mean, there's a great recommendation. But at the end of the day, if I could, wrap this in a way that after I read the book, after I spent some time on some of the parts, for example, Joan of Arc was a druid, as Léon Denis mentioned. There are a lot of spirits, a lot of folks that we may not even see from the French culture back then in the Illuminism area. There were druids that they really followed the druid, teachings, so to speak. So it might be a lot more visible, a lot more common than we could imagine. Yeah, Elizabeth Clare Prophet, Liz, same name, I guess, Elizabeth. So Elizabeth Clare Prophet, and the name of the book is Reincarnation: The Missing Link in Christianity. It should be easily found on Amazon or any one of those online stores. Elizabeth Clare Prophet.
Great. Okay, well, we're more or less come to the end. There aren't any more questions to come in, so let's take that as a good sign that we've had a wonderful talk from you today.
Or everybody slapped. So what are the two, Adam? I think it was a very full of information that people just were tired of hearing me speak, and I just slept. I'm just kidding. No, that was great. Thank you so much for the invitation once again, Adam, and the British societies and everybody that's involved in an event like this. Thank you so much for the invitation.
No, and so it's just for me to say thank you so much, Flavio, for being with us today over from Boston in the USA. And so we do have a couple of announcements. Well, one announcement on behalf of the British Union of Spiritist Societies. Let me just bring that up. And that's to invite everyone to next month's talk. And that will be on the 6th of March. Again, at the same time, 4 p.m. UK time. And this talk will be with Vanessa Anceloni. And she'll be talking about the book After Death. So again, here for the Léon Denis 175th anniversary lectures organised by the British Union of Spiritist Societies and also streamed by the Irish Spiritist Federation, Kardec Group and Kardec Radio, as well as BUS. So that's it, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for all the comments, for all the hellos, and we hope that you all stay safe, keep well, and we look forward to seeing you all again very soon.